Have you ever stared up at the night sky and felt like it was watching you back? In 1962, deep in the Cold War shadow games, the United States kicked off something called Operation Fishbowl. On paper, it was a series of high-altitude nuclear tests, detonations carried out above the Earth's atmosphere. But what they didn't explain was why. Why send nuclear weapons to the edge of space? Why risk punching holes in the magnetosphere, Earth's only shield from solar radiation? Why did scientists on the project openly admit they had no idea what would happen? The first test was a failure. A Thor missile carrying a live warhead exploded just 10 minutes after launch. The reason? Officially, engine failure. Unofficially? Let's just say a few of the crew claimed they saw something, a light hanging in the sky where nothing should be. But the real show would come with Starfish Prime. July 9th, 1962, a 1.4 megaton warhead was launched 250 miles into the sky over the Pacific. When it went off, something broke. Hawaiians hundreds of miles away saw the sky rip open. Auroras, green and red, rippled across the stars. Radios died. Streetlights blew out. Birds, disoriented, slammed into buildings. The electromagnetic pulse knocked out power grids. And here's the thing. Scientists expected a burst of light. Not this. They never expected the sky to stay lit for over 7 minutes. They never expected the color of the auroras to be wrong. They never expected the radiation belts to swell to dangerous levels, frying satellites, knocking out spy equipment, and leaving entire orbits unusable for years. And yet, they kept going. But here's where it gets weird. Why call it fishbowl? That's not military code. That's metaphor. You don't name an operation after a fishbowl unless you're testing something inside one. Unless you think you're living in one. What were they really trying to break through? What were they trying to see? They called it Starfish Prime, but what really happened that night sent more than just light across the sky. It sent a signal. Let's start with the blast. At exactly 9:09 UTC on July 9th, 1962, a Thor missile delivered a thermonuclear warhead into the darkness, 250 miles above Earth, just on the edge of space. It detonated with a force 100 times greater than Hiroshima. The flash was seen as far as New Zealand. But the light wasn't the strangest thing. What followed was an unnatural silence. Radio operators across the Pacific lost signal, not just temporarily. Some channels never came back. Amateur ham operators picked up something else entirely, a repeating tone, low, warbling, almost rhythmic. Like a heartbeat, one described it, but not human. When asked about it, military personnel laughed it off as interference, but they weren't laughing behind closed doors. Documents from the Defense Nuclear Agency declassified in 2002 show that several anomalous signals were recorded post-detonation. They were tagged with the code AV7. To this day, no one knows what that means. But here's where it gets even creepier. In the hours after Starfish Prime, animals across the Pacific behaved as if the world had ended. Dogs refused to go outside. Birds flew in tight circles until collapsing from exhaustion. Deep-sea sonar buoys registered a surge of unexplained underwater activity, thousands of feet below where light can't reach. One entry, buried in a now-redacted Navy report, mentions an impossible echo bouncing off the seafloor, as if something enormous moved beneath the test site in response to the blast. And that brings us to a name you'll never find in the mainstream record of Operation Fishbowl, Dr. Carl Jansky II, the grandson of radio astronomy pioneer Carl Jansky. Carl Jr. worked on a classified communications array in Hawaii during the tests. After Starfish Prime, he claimed his instruments picked up non-random patterns in the ionosphere, signals that didn't match any known satellite or Earth origin signal. He wrote in a personal journal, later leaked online, "We didn't blow a hole in the sky. We rang a bell, and something out there heard it." He disappeared 2 months later. Official cause of death, boating accident. His boat was recovered. His body never was. What exactly did Operation Fishbowl awaken? And why, after Starfish Prime, did the government launch 8 more high-altitude nuclear tests, each one higher, stronger, and more desperate than the last? Most people don't know about Johnston Atoll, and that's exactly how the government wanted it. A remote speck in the Pacific, this isolated U.S. military outpost was ground zero for much of Operation Fishbowl. It's where they launched the missiles, tracked the data, and according to a few brave whistleblowers, saw something they weren't supposed to see. After Starfish Prime, the U.S. didn't slow down. In fact, they ramped things up under a larger umbrella, Operation Dominic, 31 nuclear tests in total. But 7 of those were high-altitude detonations under Fishbowl's directive. The names alone were strange: Checkmate, Bluegill, Kingfish, Tightrope, each one more erratic, each one with increasing levels of equipment failure, strange light phenomena, and unexpected anomalies. But Kingfish was where the unease really started to show. Launched in October 1962, Kingfish lit the sky with a burst that lingered far too long. But it wasn't just the auroras that turned heads, it was what appeared during the blast. In footage seen only by those with Q clearance, technicians described a dark shape moving across the glow, like a blot of ink swimming through fire. It had no defined outline, just a void. Cameras tried to track it. Radar didn't register anything. One officer on site, Staff Sergeant Harold Keene, later said in a leaked deathbed interview, "It looked like the sky was bleeding, and then something swam through it, like a shadow that didn't belong to anything." The official explanation? Camera artifacting. But the footage never released, not even to Congress. And then came Bluegill Prime, a disaster. The missile malfunctioned on the launch pad and exploded, raining plutonium and debris across Johnston Atoll. Several personnel had to be decontaminated, and a few were hospitalized for radiation sickness. One later claimed in a blog post that the accident wasn't mechanical failure, it was interference. The electronics glitched out just as the guidance systems locked on, like something was jamming us, or blocking the way. There's also an internal memo, declassified in part, from Admiral Thomas Moore, which references unexpected environmental resistance at the upper atmosphere during Fishbowl's later launches. What does that mean? Some theorists believe they were trying to punch through something, not metaphorically, literally. A barrier, a shell, like the Earth was contained. And if that's true, then maybe the Fishbowl name wasn't a warning. Maybe it was an admission. Because if you fire nukes at the sky over and over again, it might not just be you watching. Now let's talk about the firmament. You've heard whispers of it in ancient texts, from the Book of Genesis to Babylonian cosmology to Norse mythology. A solid dome, a barrier, a shield that holds back the waters above. Now most people write it off as ancient metaphor, but after Operation Fishbowl, some started wondering if it was more than that. The Soviets were watching our tests closely. After Starfish Prime, cosmonauts aboard Vostok missions reported persistent glows at the edge of space, even weeks after the tests had ended. And then there's the audio. In 1963, Soviet listening stations reportedly captured bizarre signals coming from U.S. nuclear test altitudes. According to a leak from Russian intelligence in the early 90s, these included rhythmic metallic pings, spaced 8.7 seconds apart, a high-frequency hum that mirrored deep ocean sonar patterns arms, a sudden broadband screech like feedback from a broken mic, as if something had cracked. It was dubbed the Sky Shatter Signal. American scientists never publicly acknowledged these events, but internal memos from Los Alamos labs mention a classified project, Echo Glass. The theory? There's something in the upper atmosphere that reflects or reverberates energy in unnatural ways. Something thin, yet strong, almost like a shell. Some believe Fishbowl wasn't just a weapons test, it was a hammer, trying to break through the dome. But here's the twist. If there is a barrier, then what's on the other side? One theory links Fishbowl to deep Earth events. Geologists in the Pacific began reporting strange pressure changes in the crust after each test, like the planet was responding to impacts from above. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. November 1962. Tightrope was the last Fishbowl test. No big announcement, no fanfare, no public explanation, just silence, almost like someone told them to stop, or maybe they finally saw enough. Whatever the reason, Operation Fishbowl ended, and with it, an entire chapter of our sky was quietly sealed shut. After Operation Fishbowl went dark, so did the people who worked on it. By 1965, nearly a dozen scientists tied to the program had either vanished, died under mysterious circumstances, or simply walked away from their careers. No farewells, no interviews, just vanished footprints in the sand. Take Dr. Mason Thurwell, a plasma physicist stationed at Johnston Atoll during Kingfish and Bluegill. Brilliant, well-liked, deeply respected. In 1963, he filed a report warning of non-random energy signatures echoing through the ionosphere after detonations. 2 weeks later, he was found dead in a motel room in Honolulu. Cause of death? Self-inflicted wounds with a broken wine bottle. No suicide note, no alcohol in his system, just the bottle. And oddly, no fingerprints on the glass. Then there's Karen Moss, a civilian technician. She worked on communications filtering. In 1971, she wrote a letter to a former colleague claiming she was followed for months and had seen classified footage that showed lights responding to the blast, not escaping it. Days later, she was in a car accident. Brakes failed going downhill. No investigation. The letter was later misplaced. You start to see a pattern. But it's not just the people. There are objects in orbit that no one talks about. Satellites from the Fishbowl era still circling the Earth. The Transit 4B satellite, for example, launched with a nuclear-powered generator in 1961, still technically up there, but no longer transmitting. Or is it? Radio hobbyists have picked up intermittent bursts on long-dead frequencies, odd, pulsing tones followed by bursts of silence. Some believe they're automated beacons. Others, they think they're listening posts. Not ours, not Soviet, something else. One particular satellite, codenamed GRASP-7, was launched under a cover name in 1964. No known mission, no official documentation, yet it continues to maintain a perfect polar orbit, never drifting, never changing speed. A deep space radar leak from a European observatory labeled it as non-standard composition. Translation? It doesn't reflect radar like normal satellites, it absorbs it. And one final oddity, nearly every Fishbowl-era satellite passes within a narrow band above Antarctica. Why? That brings us to the coldest mystery of all. At the bottom of the world lies Antarctica, a continent of ice, secrecy, and silence. It's the most heavily restricted landmass on Earth. Governed by the Antarctic Treaty, no one country can claim it, and no military activity is allowed. That's the official story. But the timing of that treaty, signed in 1959, just before Operation Fishbowl, almost like the powers that be knew they needed to lock the continent down. So what does Antarctica have to do with nuclear detonations in the sky? Some believe the upper atmosphere anomalies created by Fishbowl weren't isolated, that the energy from those blasts rippled through the magnetosphere, traveling the globe and concentrating at the poles, places where Earth's magnetic field is weakest. And some say that at the South Pole, something responded. Weird seismic activity was logged in Antarctica just hours after Starfish Prime and Kingfish. And in 1965, a team of geologists with the U.S. Navy abruptly canceled their mission after allegedly losing contact with 2 team members near the Ross Ice Shelf. The official report states a storm was to blame, but an anonymous radio operator claimed he overheard their last transmission. It's not ice, it's metal, buried, circular, then static. That same year, spy satellites recorded a perfectly round heat signature under the ice, 400 meters wide. No official explanation was ever given. Decades later, leaked footage from an Argentine science station shows a shimmering distortion in the sky over the Queen Maud Land region, just days after an electromagnetic pulse was picked up by European weather satellites. The distortion? Like heat waves, but at -40 degrees. Some speculate this was a door, a transient event triggered by some resonance left behind from Fishbowl. A tear. A response. And here's the part most never hear. In 1998, during a joint Chilean-American research drill, scientists bored into a deep subglacial lake beneath the ice. They lowered a hydrophone, a microphone for underwater sound. For 3 days, it recorded nothing unusual. On the 4th day, at 3:17 a.m., it picked up a sound. Not a creature, not ice shifting, not water moving. It was a tone, identical in pitch to the sky shatter signal recorded in 1962. Then, silence. The drill was pulled, the lake sealed, and the research team was reassigned. No further dives have been attempted. So what was Operation Fishbowl really about? A weapons test? An experiment in atmospheric physics? Or was it a message sent blindly into the void, a knock on the glass, hoping no one would knock back? Maybe we really are in a fishbowl. And maybe we cracked it. But whatever's on the outside, it's still watching. And it hasn't forgotten what we tried to do. Like, share, and don't forget to subscribe, because they don't want you to know. But we'll keep telling these stories anyway. until they shut us down.